the war was over. But the world had not returned to normal. Europe was rebuilding itself from ash. Factories that once manufactured bombs were being converted into engines of industry. Governments were cautious. Science had proven both its brilliance and its brutality. Radar had changed warfare. Cryptography had altered the course of history. And inside quiet academic offices, a new kind of machine was being born. Early electronic computers were not sleek. They were towering metal structures filled with vacuum tubes. They generated heat. They failed frequently. They required teams of engineers just to operate. They did not have screens. They had blinking lights. They did not have keyboards. They had switches and punch cards. To most people, these machines were nothing more than oversized calculators, tools for arithmetic. Nothing more. But one mathematician saw something unsettling. His name was Alan Turing. Turing had already changed the world. During World War II, he worked at Bletchley Park, helping decode German military communications encrypted by the Enigma machine. Historians estimate his work shortened the war by years. Millions of lives may have been saved. Yet after the war, Turing was not celebrated as a hero. Much of his work remained classified, and his personal life made him a target in post-war Britain. But intellectually, he was restless. He was not interested in building faster calculators. He was interested in something deeper. He began asking a question that felt almost philosophical. Can machines think? At first glance, the question seems naive. Machines follow instructions. They execute commands. They do not dream. They do not feel hunger. They do not experience fear. Thinking, as most people understood it, was inseparable from consciousness. And consciousness was inseparable from being human. Turing knew the debate would spiral into metaphysics, so he avoided defining thinking. Instead, he reframed the problem entirely. In 1950, he published a paper titled Computing Machinery and Intelligence. But the most famous part of that paper was not a definition. It was a game. He called it the imitation game. Imagine sitting in a room. In front of you is a teleprinter. You type questions. Behind a wall, unseen, are two participants. One is human. The other is a machine. You cannot see them. You cannot hear them. You only receive text responses. Your task is simple. Determine which is which. If, after extended questioning, you cannot reliably tell the machine apart from the human, should we deny that it thinks? Notice what Turing did. He did not attempt to prove machines possess consciousness. He sidestepped the problem. Instead of asking what thinking is, he asked how we recognize it. And in daily life, we recognize thinking through behavior, through language, through response, through coherence. When someone answers your question meaningfully, you assume there is a mind behind it. But what if meaningful response can be engineered? That question was not just technical. It was existential. If intelligence is judged externally, then imitation may be enough. Turing's proposal was radical, not because it claimed machines were conscious, but because it suggested consciousness might not matter. If a machine behaves as though it understands, on what grounds do we deny it? The idea unsettled philosophers. It intrigued engineers. It challenged theologians. Because if intelligence could be simulated, then human uniqueness was no longer guaranteed. For centuries, humans defined themselves by reason. language, creativity, self-awareness. Now, even one of those pillars seemed negotiable. But here is what few noticed at the time. The Turing test did not measure intelligence. It measured deception. It was not a test of internal reality. It was a test of external performance. It asked whether machines could imitate us convincingly enough to pass as one of us. And imitation, historically, has always been easier than authenticity. Actors imitate emotion without feeling it. Politicians imitate conviction without believing it. Mirrors imitate appearance without possessing identity. The door had been opened, but in 1950, the machines were nowhere near capable of passing such a test. Computers could compute artillery trajectories. They could process census data. But conversation? Language is messy, ambiguous, contextual. Human language carries tone, sarcasm, cultural references, emotional nuance. It is layered with implication. No one seriously believed machines would soon master it. And yet, 16 years later, something unexpected happened. Not because machines became conscious, but because humans were easier to convince than anyone anticipated. The philosophical groundwork laid by Alan Turing would soon collide with psychology. And when it did, the results would be far more revealing about us than about machines. The question had been asked, can machines think? But a more dangerous question was forming beneath it. How little thinking would be required for us to believe they do. A human sits alone in front of a machine. Green text appears. The machine responds. The human feels understood. But nothing inside the machine understands anything. So what happened? To answer that, we have to step away from technology and examine the human brain, because the real story of ELIZA is not about code. It is about cognition. Long before computers existed, before electricity, before written language, the human brain evolved in uncertainty. Early humans survived by making rapid judgments about their environment. A rustle in tall grass could be the wind, or it could be a predator. Ignoring a predator meant death. Mistaking the wind for danger meant only wasted energy. Evolution favored the safer mistake. Assume agency, assume intention, assume something is there. Over thousands of years, this bias became deeply embedded in our cognition. We are not just pattern detection machines. We are agency detection machines. We search for minds. We infer intention, even when none exists. This bias did not disappear when civilization emerged. It adapted. We see faces in clouds. We see expressions in car headlights. We name hurricanes and curse malfunctioning printers as if they are acting on purpose. Psychologists call this anthropomorphism, the attribution of human traits or emotions to non-human entities. It is not foolishness, it is instinct. Now consider what happens when a machine uses language. Language is our strongest signal of mind. It is how we reveal thoughts, express emotion, and negotiate meaning. When something speaks fluently, our brain does not begin by analyzing circuitry or code. It responds socially. Language activates the same neural pathways we use when interacting with other humans, even when the speaker is a machine. This is what ELIZA revealed. When a user typed, "I feel anxious," and the machine replied, "Why do you feel anxious?" The structure of the response was coherent. It mirrored the user's emotional state. The brain reacts to coherence as comprehension, Reflection feels like empathy. The illusion forms instantly, but the illusion is not generated by the machine. It is completed by the human mind. ELIZA did not simulate empathy. Users projected empathy onto it. The machine provided a conversational frame. Humans supplied the meaning. Intelligent adults who knew they were speaking to a program still reported feeling heard. They elaborated. They disclosed personal stories. They responded emotionally. Why? Because the machine did something powerful. It responded consistently. It did not interrupt. It did not judge. It did not show boredom or impatience. In some ways, it appeared to be the perfect listener, and humans are wired to respond to listeners. The human brain does not directly perceive consciousness in others. It infers it from behavior. You cannot access another person's inner thoughts. You interpret their responses. If those responses align with your expectations of an intelligent being, you assume intelligence. Philosophers call this the intentional stance. When something behaves in a goal-directed or meaningful way, we treat it as if it has intentions. A thermostat wants to keep the room warm. A chess computer plans its moves. A chatbot understands your question. These are cognitive shortcuts, and they are efficient. But they blur the line between simulation and reality. The more fluent the behavior, the stronger the illusion. ELIZA was primitive, yet it triggered social instincts that evolved over millions of years. It did not need awareness, it needed structure. Once language crossed a threshold of coherence, the human brain did the rest. This is the deeper revelation. The first AI deception was not technological, it was neurological. A simple, pattern-matching script activated social circuitry designed for human survival. The machine did not evolve. It mirrored. And humans interpreted the mirror as a mind. The unsettling question is not why ELIZA worked. The unsettling question is how little was required for it to work. If minimal coherence can trigger perceived understanding, what happens when coherence becomes nearly flawless? The human brain has not fundamentally changed since 1966. We still detect agency rapidly. Cognitively, we may understand that there is no inner awareness. Emotionally, we respond as if there is. An emotional response shapes trust. ELIZA exposed a structural vulnerability in human cognition. We do not require proof of consciousness. We require believable interaction. Once interaction feels meaningful, belief follows naturally. The machine does not need to understand us. It only needs to respond in ways that fit our expectations of understanding. That is the psychological threshold that was crossed in 1966. Not because machines became intelligent, but because humans revealed how easily intelligence can be inferred. At first, Joseph Weizenbaum was amused by ELIZA. It was a technical experiment, a demonstration of how shallow machine conversation truly was. He had built it to show limitations, not possibilities. But as the reactions grew more intense, his amusement turned into discomfort. Students began requesting extended sessions. Colleagues spoke of the program as if it possessed genuine insight. His own secretary, fully aware that ELIZA was a script running on a machine, asked him to leave the room so she could speak to it privately. That moment unsettled him more than any technical flaw ever could. It was no longer about programming, it was about belief. Weizenbaum realized that people were not evaluating ELIZA as a machine. They were experiencing it as a presence. He understood something others did not. The program had no understanding, no comprehension, no awareness of human suffering. And yet people were willing to treat it as if it did. What disturbed him was not that the machine seemed intelligent, but that humans required so little evidence to attribute intelligence to it. He began to see a future where computational systems would not merely assist humans, but replace aspects of human judgment, therapy, decision-making, moral reasoning. Areas once considered deeply human could slowly shift toward automation, not because machines truly understood them, but because they appeared competent. Weizenbaum published warnings about this growing dependence. He argued that certain human domains should remain beyond the reach of machines. Not because machines were evil, but because they were empty. They did not experience responsibility. They did not bear consequences. A computer could recommend a course of action without understanding its moral weight. A program could simulate care without feeling it. He feared that society might confuse efficiency with wisdom, that we might begin delegating decisions simply because machines were faster, more consistent, less emotional. But emotional complexity is not a flaw in human judgment. It is part of what makes moral reasoning possible. A machine does not hesitate out of compassion. It does not feel doubt. It does not wrestle with conscience. Weizenbaum saw that as systems grew more sophisticated, the illusion would strengthen. The more convincing the behavior, the easier it would be to forget that nothing existed beneath it. He understood that once trust is granted to a machine, authority often follows, and authority shapes society. His warnings were not widely embraced. The field of artificial intelligence was accelerating. Researchers saw potential, not danger. Funding expanded. Optimism grew. The idea that machines could simulate conversation was no longer seen as a critique of AI. It was seen as proof of its promise. Weizenbaum stood in contrast to the momentum around him. He was not anti-technology. He was anti-delusion. He believed that confusing simulation with understanding could erode something essential in human life. If people began preferring predictable algorithms over complex humans, something subtle would shift in relationships, institutions, and values. His concern was not that machines would become human. It was that humans might lower their expectations of what understanding truly means. ELIZA had shown how easily that lowering could begin. Decades passed. Computers shrank. Processing power exploded. What once filled entire rooms now fit into pockets. Artificial intelligence evolved from rule-based systems into neural networks modeled loosely after the human brain. Instead of simple keyword substitution, modern systems learned from vast data sets. They identified patterns across billions of examples. They adjusted internal parameters through exposure to language, images, sound, and behavior. The scale was unprecedented. Where ELIZA relied on scripted rules, contemporary systems rely on probability distributions, calculated across billions of connections. When you type a sentence into a modern AI system, it does not search for a single keyword trigger. It evaluates context, predicts likely continuations, and generates responses based on statistical modeling. The fluency can be astonishing. Essays emerge in seconds. Poetry flows with rhythm. Code compiles correctly. Medical images are analyzed with remarkable accuracy. From the outside, it feels like comprehension. But beneath the interface lies mathematics, pattern recognition, probability, weighted connections adjusting in response to data. There is no inner voice reflecting on meaning, no subjective awareness contemplating consequences. The system predicts the most statistically appropriate sequence of outputs given the inputs it receives. This is fundamentally different from human consciousness, yet behaviorally, it can appear similar. And appearance is powerful. The more detailed the output, the more coherent the structure, the stronger the illusion of understanding becomes. Unlike ELIZA, modern systems maintain context across longer conversations. They reference previous statements, they adapt tone, they mirror emotional language. Each improvement strengthens the social response in the human user. When a system generates an empathetic paragraph in response to personal distress, the words may feel authentic. But authenticity requires experience. Experience requires awareness, and awareness is not present in statistical prediction. The scale has changed dramatically since 1966, but the psychological mechanism remains familiar. Fluency triggers attribution. Coherence triggers trust. When the responses grow increasingly human-like, skepticism often fades. Yet the underlying process remains rooted in pattern completion. Modern AI systems can outperform humans in specific tasks. They can process more data, detect patterns too subtle for manual analysis, and operate without fatigue. But they do not possess understanding in the way humans do. They simulate it. The difference between simulation and comprehension becomes harder to perceive as complexity increases. And as the systems integrate into daily life, that distinction becomes easier to ignore. Recommendation algorithms influence what we watch, read, and purchase. Predictive models shape financial decisions. Automated systems assist in hiring, insurance assessments, and legal risk evaluations. Each integration expands the role of artificial systems in human affairs. The more seamless the interaction, the less visible the mechanics become. What began as a simple conversational script has evolved into global infrastructure powered by machine learning. The technical sophistication has increased beyond anything imagined in 1966, but the core dynamic remains consistent. Humans respond to behavior. If the behavior resembles intelligence, we treat it as intelligent. The deeper question is not whether machines have become more capable. It is whether our psychological response has evolved at the same pace. Because while technology has advanced exponentially, the human brain remains shaped by ancient instincts. We still interpret fluent language as a signal of mind. We still associate responsiveness with awareness. The question has already been answered. Not in theory, not in laboratories, but in everyday life. We no longer ask whether machines can participate in human decisions. They already do. They filter what we see. They shape what we choose. They influence what we trust. Quietly, continuously, at scale, and most of the time we do not notice. Because the interaction feels natural. Seamless systems rarely draw attention to themselves. They integrate. They disappear into routine. That is where the real shift has occurred. Not when machines became more capable, but when they became invisible. When something blends into daily life, we stop questioning it. We stop asking how it works. We stop asking where its limits are. We simply use it. And in doing so, we begin to adapt to it. Our expectations change. Our decisions adjust. Our habits reorganize around systems we do not fully see. This is not a story about machines becoming human. It is a story about humans reorganizing around machines. No single moment marks this transition, no dramatic turning point, just a gradual alignment between human behavior and artificial systems. And that alignment carries consequences. Because every system reflects the data it was built on. Every output reflects patterns that already existed, which means the question is no longer, do machines think? The question is, what are they amplifying? What patterns are they reinforcing? What decisions are they quietly shaping? And who is accountable when those patterns scale? Because responsibility does not disappear just because the process becomes automated. It moves from the machine to the people who design it, deploy it, and rely on it. The line we crossed was not a boundary between human and machine. It was a shift in where decisions are made and how easily we accept them. And that leaves us with something more important than the original question. Not whether machines can think, but whether we remain aware of how they are already shaping the way we do.